All right, I'm back again. Just have some issues with the device. All right, so there are two learning objectives that we're going to look at today, ladies. One, what is history? And the second learning objective is how historians reconstruct history. Therefore, I've been asking some students, what is history? Let us see if I can hear
Excuse
now.
me, sir.
Yeah,
Um, there's someone in the waiting room.
yeah, man, I just accepted her. Thank you very much. So, Gabriel, you can go again. I didn't hear clearly.
Sir, history is the study of like past events and past life.
So, past events, past life. All right, very good. Brown, is that Joanna Brown?
Yes, sir.
Joanna, what is history? When you hear the word history, what comes to mind?
The study of past events, the people, the society, and also like the problems that they faced in the past.
Okay, yes, that is correct. Now, there are some key words that we're going to look at. Keywords. Generalization. So in your notebooks, you're going to write key terms or keywords, key terms, key words, and one of the key terms, generalization. So you're going to write generalization. Your next key term is emphasis. Your next key term is emphasis. Another key term, hypothesis. Another key term, hypothesis. Another key term, objectivity. Objectivity. Another key term, validity. Validity. Another one, reconstruction. Reconstruction. Next one, judgment. Judgment. And the last key term that we're going to look at is bias. Bias. Now, 5 minutes. You're going to use your devices, students. 5 minutes. You're going to use your devices and you're going to define those terms. Then we're going to have a discussion on those terms. So 5 minutes, easy, easy. I think a student just entered the room. So the student just entered the room. We are defining some key terms. And the first key term that we are defining, you're using your devices to define these key terms. The first key term is generalization. Generalization. The next one is emphasis. Emphasis. The next one, hypothesis. Hypothesis. The next one, objectivity. Objectivity. Validity. Validity. Reconstruction. Reconstruction. Judgment and bias. Now I'm going to ask you to define those key terms for me, please. Once you're through, ladies, just let me know when you're through defining those terms.
Sir, I'm finished.
Thank you very much. All right, ladies, we should be through by now. Now, as we started off early in the class, the we asked the question, what is history? And most students responded that history is a study of the past. What is history? A study of the past. Now, nevertheless, there's one thing that we need to know. It is much more than merely knowing. History is much more than merely knowing about the past. So that is something that you need to, a myth that you need to dispel, or we need to dispel that myth. History is much more than knowing the past. Because if it is just by knowing the past, then we would not have such a detailed syllabus, or you would not be asked, for example, they could ask you in the exam, what is slavery, and just talk about slavery, just give a definition of slavery. History is more than just knowing the past. And the next thing that you need to know, ladies, is that history is different from storytelling. History is different from storytelling. Although storytellers may use history. If you're, most of you are literature students, or all of you would have done literature, you'd have realized that books that you would have studied have some form of historical element to it. So, to myth, history is much more than knowing the past, and history is very different from telling a story. The study of history is very different. Now, what is history that we are looking at? History is looking at how events, so you can write this definition down. History is looking or studying. History is studying those events that impacted the life of people. History is the study of those events that impacted the life of people of that time, of that time, and how those events significantly influence human development, and how those events significantly influence human development. So, in other words, history is not just knowing the past, and it is not like you're telling a story. What are the elements of history that we just, out of that definition, what are the elements? Which student want to volunteer? What are the elements of history?
Sir?
Yes, go ahead.
Sir, development,
So one, what development?
human development.
Human development. All right. So human development is one. So history must look at how the past influence human development. When we talk about human development, what are we talking about? And you can, anyone want to jump in? Renee, Lorraine, you can, and also Taylor. All right, so Taylor, in the chat, Taylor said, oh, human culture is based on their practices. All right. So human development has to do with, we live today in a society, and history determines, or past determines, how that society was developed, the events that developed that society. Another important point, ladies, from that definition is that you are not just studying people and people's relation to how they would have developed, but you are looking at people and how they develop within a time span. So history has to do with time, people that live in a specific time period. So three things, the three elements of history. One, you're studying, or I would say four elements of history: events, people, time, events, people, time, and human development. Or those events by the people,
Repeat.
repeat,
Yes, sir.
or you want me to repeat? All right,
The
so the four elements of history is one, people, events, people, events, time, and human development. Good. The next thing, ladies, is that history involves the interpretation of the past. So you not only want to know about the past, you need to interpret the past. You need to question the event that happened in the past. You need to ask yourself, but if slavery happened, you need to ask yourself these questions. So when you're writing, you need to ask these questions when you're writing. What happened? So you need to ask yourself these questions. What happened? When it happened? What happened? When it happened. So when it happened is dealing with the time when it happened. When it happened. How it happened. What happened? How it happened. you need to also ask yourself where it happened. So what, when, how, and why. So when you're writing, you need to ask yourself these questions. For every single paragraph that you develop, you need to answer these questions. What, when, how, and why. What it happened. What happened, when it happened, how it happened. What, when, how, and why. All right? So these are some of the, so when you interpret history, you ask these very important questions. Now, historians hypothesize about the past. What do we mean by hypothesize or hypothesis? So historians hypothesize about the past.
An explanation.
They give an explanation. Anyone else? You're correct, but
Sir,
it's yes.
it means that is also a theory.
Our hypothesis is a theory. You're correct.
Sir, they give an insight into the natural world, like a concept that isn't yet verified.
Well, that is you're on track. You're on track. Now listen up now, ladies. Hypothesis in history. Now, the student that spoke before, that definition of hypothesis tends to deal with the the natural science the natural science definition, right? Now, in the humanities or for history, when we talk about hypothesis, it is a suggested explanation. Hypothesis, you theorize, as the student said. Hypothesis is suggested explanation of an event or consequence. So an hypothesis in history is explaining, how do you explain an event that happened or the consequences of the event. Let us give an example. In earlier this year, we had the a major movement in the United States. What was that movement about? Anyone want to explain?
Black Lives Matter.
Black Lives Matter. Everywhere you go, Black Lives Matter. Now, what was the event that led to Black Lives Matter?
The killing of George Floyd.
Yeah,
The killing of?
George
George
Floyd.
Floyd.
So that is the event. So the event is the killing of George Floyd. Now, as the historian, how do you explain the killing of George Floyd, and why is it that people are revolting or rebelling or rioting? Why? It must be a reason. There's a context behind the reason, because, for example, in Jamaica, every single day a police kill a black man, but we are not seeing any riot from the killing. We're not seeing the country locked down like the United States. what is the historical context? How do you explain the killing of George Floyd? Somebody please go. Explain
Um,
it. Yes.
the police killed an innocent man.
So the police kill an innocent man. Is it just because he's an innocent man?
Because
Where
they're
is the
always killing innocent black
Because
men.
he's a black.
Sir, it's basically racial injustice.
racial injustice? But what? So where that racial injustice came from?
Sir, back in the day, like when the black people were fighting against the white people, and you know,
You're correct, but there's something deeper to it.
Sir,
Why? Yes.
sir, back in the day, the black race was inferior to the white supremacists. So probably their ancestors, they still have that same mentality nowadays.
Very good. Now, so there's an idea. So your explanation is an idea of what? That blacks were considered to be inferior. So that's your explanation. What event would have caused white Americans to believe that they were superior to blacks? What event? What event in the past would have caused that?
Slavery?
Slavery. So for years in the United States,
Not only the United States.
not only in the, but remember where we are looking at? We're looking at George Floyd, that event, and we're trying to explain that event. But you are very, very correct, not only in the United States, right here in Jamaica, very correct. And that's what we call comparative analysis. So when you're writing your papers, yes, you said not only in the United States, but also this is a phenomena in Jamaica and other Caribbean countries. All right? Excellent. So the question or the root of the reason why people are protesting in the United States is that they believe that for years from slavery until now, blacks, because of the color of their skin, because of their ethnicity, they are treated as the other. They are treated differently. They are treated badly. And so when that killing happened, it has, a student would have mentioned that it was an injustice. It is an injustice to the black people because it is something that is ongoing. And those who are in charge, they are not doing anything about it. And so what all of you would have just done is hypothesize on that event. You would have given explanation on the reason why you believe the people in the United States rioted when it came to George Floyd. All right? Now, as historians, we are going to hypothesize about the past. And by hypothesizing, we are going to make general statements. We're going to make general statements. We're going to generalize. Any students, when we talk about generalization, what are we talking about? From your definition, generalization.
the process of formulating general concepts by abstracting common properties of instances.
Yes. So generalization is making that statement, that one statement about the past. All right? Not only You're making a broad statement or an opinion about the past, but what your statement that you're making must be valid and reliable. Your statements must be what? Valid and reliable. When we talk about validity, what are we talking about? From your definitions, anyone would have
Sir,
Factually sound,
repeat?
being logically and factually sound.
Factually sound. And reliability, if you can rely on something, that means it is trustworthy evidence. So validity, it is factually sound. And reliability, it is that it's a trustworthy evidence. So you cannot make a general statement that is not valid, and you cannot make a general statement that is not reliable. It must have facts. So when you're studying history, it must be factual and it must be trustworthy. All right, students? Now, these are some of the reasons why we study history. The thing that with history is that history is written from a human perspective. So there are different biases when it comes to history. American history textbooks are very much different from history textbooks in the Caribbean. Some history textbook, I should say. History is constantly changed. Well, the interpretation of history has constantly changed as new evidence emerge, always changing. And so I'm going to draw an example about generalization that a student used earlier. She said that blacks were considered inferior. Do you believe blacks were considered inferior?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
What? And so that is a general statement. So you need their statement to be factual, valid. You need your statement to be valid and reliable. What evidence do you have to say that blacks were considered inferior? What is your evidence? Come on, you can answer the question. Let us see who I can call on.
I think they were forced to be inferior because of the Europeans and what they went through.
Because of what the European did, what event?
sir, slavery.
Yeah.
Slavery is
Into
one, but
slavery.
not only slavery, but also blacks would have been excluded after slavery ended. Blacks would have been excluded from voting.
Yeah, certain jobs and those stuff.
Yeah,
So,
certain privileges.
Yeah.
Sir, they
privilege,
couldn't own land as well.
they couldn't own lands. Not yes, you are very correct.
Sir, the
If
Jim
you,
Crow laws?
the Jim Crow laws. Also, if you look at uh, if you look at the what it 1 second, if you look at the certain schools, you realize that there's a certain color or race of people that attend certain schools. Blacks are excluded from those places. Back in the days, blacks were not allowed to work in the banks. They were not allowed to attend schools like Oxford University, Cambridge, Harvard, Yale, Stanford. blacks were excluded from schools in Jamaica, like Jamaica College,
Immaculate Alpha.
right? So I think Alpha and Immaculate are later done. But the truth is that dark-skinned persons like myself were excluded from those schools. And that's the historical fact.
So the
Sir,
apartheid system?
So there was a system of apartheid. Slavery is like a system of apartheid, a system of segregation
And prejudiced.
and prejudice also. And so the general statement is that blacks are inferior, but we know that that statement is not true by itself. We have to say blacks were considered inferior by whites, and we give the evidence to support that answer. The evidence is that because they were excluded from certain places, certain schools, the laws that were passed in relation to black, the system of slavery that blacks would have endured. And today, some people still continue to exclude blacks and to treat blacks as negative in an inferior manner. And so as historians, we have to employ a skill that is called critical thinking skills. So you need to put that down. Critical thinking skills. So by critical thinking skills is that you're going to question existing generalization. You're going to question, you're going to ask questions about general statements that have been made by historians. So you're going to question things like if you read a history book and they say blacks were inferior, or they say blacks are inferior, the are mean that they are still inferior. I am not inferior. You are not inferior. And so what we need to act, we need to start to question those general statements. And we need to support our view on the general statement. Now, having your view on the general statement is called a thesis. So your thesis on it, you know as a student, you're going to hypothesize what is your view on the issue. But your thesis must be supported by two things. It must be supported by what, ladies?
facts,
Facts and
evidence,
evidence. Evidence is the same thing as facts. So what is the word that I use? It's a V word. It must be
validity, should
valid
be
or
valid,
validity. Yes, or the R word is
reliable, reliable.
reliable. All right. So what you're doing must be valid and it must be reliable. All right, ladies. So certain things that we need to recap. One, history is about issues are more than studying the past. There's quite a lot of historians do generalize. There's a lot of generalization. They make statements about the past. And so as a result of that, you as a student need to ensure that your information must be valid and reliable. And not because you're of a particular ethnic group means that you should not be what? The whole word is objective. So what is objectivity? Objectivity?
Sir, judgment based on observable phenomena and uninfluenced by emotions or personal prejudice.
Very good. Uninfluenced by personal prejudice. So in other words, when you're an objective person,
You're
it
fair.
is your fear, your view has no bias. There's no preconceived notion
Sir, any
about
decisions are based on facts.
excellent. Your decisions are based only on the facts. All right. So, ladies, I trust that you understand what we're going to do when we study history. So, when we meet tomorrow and we start to look, is tomorrow, when we meet again and we start to look at, for example, the indigenous people, we are going to question certain statements that the Kalinagos, or what they used to call the Cabs, were cannibals. We're going to ask ourselves, cannibals? Why the
Excuse
place?
me, sir.
Yes.
Our next meeting is on Monday.
So when we meet again on Monday, that is very sad. I was hoping that we would meet on Friday. But that's okay. When we meet again on Monday, we are going to look at these some general statements that have been made about the indigenous people. All right, ladies, thank you very, very much.
Yes, sir.
We meet again. Hope you enjoy the class.
Same to you.
Yes, sir, I did.
Yes, sir.
All right.
Yes, sir.
Bye. Bye, ladies.
Bye, sir.